All right. I'm glad our dog is going to get the treatment.
She already wants to get home with her now because I texted her at like 3 a.m. I said, "Hey, babe, let me know what time. I'll go with you. I'll make sure he's good for you."
All right. All right, everybody, it is 1:05. You are back to the streaming study hall for Curious Cats. You know where it's at. It is Balco Books. I am saying goodbye to my beloved. She is going swimming. Goodbye, beloved.
Goodbye.
Have a good swim. All right. So, today, since it is Juneteenth, I do want to first learn a little bit more about what Juneteenth is. That is one of my first goals. And secondly, I want to tighten up some of my routines and sort of get everything squared away with that. So let's get to it. I'm also going to post to the Blue Sky that I'm going to do that, but I'm going to put myself on mute. I'm going to also One sec. Okay. All right. Cool. So I will see you in 45 minutes. 45 minutes. Pause myself and mute myself and see you then.
Hey, you okay?
How does this benefit you at all?
I guess I just don't want you to feel like you're nothing.
I'm not even a real person.
understand. About the adventures? Why even go on them at all? Why not try to find a way to leave?
Well, we usually do when we first arrive, but after a while you start to realize that you really can't leave. Thank goodness this is all a dream. Right, Pomni? You really can't leave, and constantly chasing an unattainable goal will start driving you a bit crazy.
All right, people, we're gonna start coming back. There's a lot to learn about Juneteenth. Of course, I should have expected that because it is a holiday for so many people, and I don't like that I don't know more about it, and it's frustrating that I wasn't taught more of this, and that people, white people, me, other white people, aren't given as much, like we're not encouraged to learn as much about it because it's not a holiday celebrating our emancipation. So I was on Wikipedia, my favorite website, and I wasn't able to get further than around 100 years after the start of Juneteenth. But I do want to go over what I learned, what I figured out, or not what I figured out, but like what I've been able to glean from my like 45 or so minutes of studying. So bear with me for 1 sec as I get set up here. So Juneteenth was on June 19th, 1865, the Major General Gordon Granger essentially ordered the enforcement of the Emancipation Proclamation in Texas. Texas was the last holdout of the Emancipation Proclamation in like following it. So when Abraham Lincoln delivered the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, leave 1 sec. Yeah, so in 1860, actually, I'm sorry. It was a lot of information. On September 22nd, 1862, Abraham Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, and he said it would go into effect next January. So January 1863. That was when everyone was supposed to be freed, and it was essentially a warning shot to all Confederate states that were still holding out on submitting to the Union Army's might. If you don't stop doing the slavery, we're gonna come over there and gonna make you stop doing the slavery. It was a threat. So it's and when the Emancipation Proclamation was first delivered, it was very inconsistently enforced across the states. So different states took longer to actually get along with it than others. Like until the 13th Amendment was ratified, Kentucky and Delaware were the last remaining enslaved people to be freed. So June 19th, 1865, that is the day that General Gordon Granger said, all right, Texas, we're done with this. We're done doing slavery. And, naturally, the Confederacy did not take this line down, because abolishing slavery meant eradicating the entire workforce that has basically built up the Southern economy up until that point. So, the 13th Amendment, was ratified, and even in that, in the 13th Amendment, there was a clause. I believe it was the 13th Amendment. There was a clause that slavery was not allowed unless punishment for a crime. So, the South found all sorts of ways to criminalize being black in all sorts of different ways. So when we were at Juneteenth at that point, so firstly, the celebrations were largely called like jubilees, to reference the biblical jubilee, which I have to imagine means the emancipation of slaves. Typically, there are read food and drinks. There's poetry readings, public readings of the Emancipation Proclamation, street fairs, rodeos, cookouts, reunions, park parties, lectures, exhibitions. It was a celebration of the fact that the military might of slavery had officially been quashed. And Juneteenth took place, let me see, it was... So Juneteenth, so here, this is the timeline. September 22nd, September 22nd, 1862, that's when Abraham Lincoln announced the Emancipation Proclamation. January 1st, 1863, that is when the Emancipation Proclamation was supposed to go into effect for everyone. And by the time Juneteenth happened in 1865, that was 900 days after the Emancipation Proclamation was to go into effect. That was 91 days after loser Robert Lee surrendered on April 9th, 1865, and that was 24 days after the disbanding of the Confederate Army's presence in Texas. So truly, Juneteenth was the forces for slavery don't have any bark, don't have any bite. They're all bark and no bite. We're free. And this then spurred the first Great Migration, which is when black folks went all sorts of places, and they brought this celebration with them. They brought Juneteenth with them. Largely, they weren't able to use public spaces because segregation was still very much a thing, and they would often celebrate in churches or like next to bodies of water, like lakeside. Celebrations declined. Oh, well, actually, so because people were prevented from using public areas for Juneteenth celebrations, they would sometimes pool their money together to buy land specifically to have the celebrations. As we went into the beginning of the 20th century, celebrations declined because everyone had to work, essentially. Jim Crow laws made it more difficult for actually let me just make sure I'm saying this accurately. Early Juneteenth celebrations, decline of Jim Crow laws. Yeah, so from 1890 to 1908, Texas and other Confederate states passed a bunch of laws and amendments that made it a lot harder for black people to be involved in the political process of those states. And there were also some social pressures where black folks that wanted to, upwardly that were upwardly mobile and wanted to leave behind their slave roots to participate in mainstream culture, they like declined to celebrate Juneteenth anymore because they thought it was it was connecting them to their roots as slaves, and that's just so sad. But as time went on and economic forces made it really hard to take the day off, folks would find different places to have Juneteenth celebrations anyway. So from 1936 to 1952, the Texas State Fair became the de facto Juneteenth place. And actually, a tradition in Juneteenth is to make a sort of like pilgrimage to the spot where Major General Gordon Granger made the announcement, even though it was probably posted on like notices around around the area, but that was the place where the Juneteenth celebration was born, essentially. Also something to know, there are other kinds of celebrations elsewhere for different sorts of manifestations of emancipation. So the Black Seminoles celebrate Dia de los Negros on June 19th, and they are the emancipated slaves that instead settled in Mexico. So the Black Seminoles are the ones that are there. Former British colonies celebrate Emancipation Day on August 1st, and that's in celebration of the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833. So they have their own Juneteenth-esque celebration there. And the UN has August 31st designated as the International Day for People of African Descent. Let me see. What else? The purpose of Juneteenth, according to like historians, seems to be to celebrate, educate, and agitate. There's lots of food. There's good. Everyone's like dressed to the nines. And they're like street fairs. They're big, like loud celebrations of the the fact that the Confederacy is a bunch of losers, and I like that. It became a federal holiday in 2021. That was Joe Biden, and that's the newest federal holiday since MLK Day in 1983. Let me see. Texas. So Texas, the holdout, Texas, the one that was the last one to really get with the program, was actually the first state to recognize the holiday in 1938. And by 1979, all states have, at that point, recognized, and DC, all states and Washington, D.C. acknowledged Juneteenth as a holiday. Celebrations often had voter registration efforts alongside. Soul food was very important for the heritage. Barbecue especially was very important to representing that. Let me see. Is there anything else? And yeah, I got up to there were actually fewer, and this is contrary to what one might think, but there were fewer celebrations of Juneteenth during the Civil Rights era because they were being overshadowed by those efforts. But after the Civil Rights era, resulted in the Civil Rights Act, then we started to see more Juneteenth celebrations into the 1970s, and there are a bunch more. There's a bunch more information about Juneteenth. I just really wanted like a solid base of like, what the heck is it? Why do people celebrate it? What's the significance of it? Because again, I wasn't I wasn't included in the conversation of, hey, this is some important history, because I grew up in a white town, which didn't care about doing stuff like that, and that this is endemic of lots of places in the United States that just don't they don't highlight this kind of history. So I hope that this was informational for you to some extent. I'm going to take a quick 5-minute break. I'm gonna also just do some vocal warm-ups, but even just talking right now has been a help. And in a few, we're gonna go pivot to study hall. I'm sorry, not study hall. We're gonna pivot to story time and read the next 2 chapters of Sherlock Holmes. So I'm gonna put on that music and give it 5 minutes, and let's. I'll see you then. So I'll see you in 5. Okay. Well, BRB. All right. So it is time. Let us get started. Post haste. I think I've decided that for today, I do not want to do the accents. It's distracting, and I want to be more present for the story, and I want to be also more present for the explainer at the end, since now I have a couple going up, and I want to be I want it to be concise, and I don't want it to be overly rambly. So last time we were reading, let me oh, I just realized. Okay. Last time we were reading, we just talked with John Rance. John Rance was the constable who saw these two individuals, so the murderer and the victim. This was the constable that saw both of them enter the house together and saw one of them leave and come back. He didn't see much else. He was a night patrolman. Once his buddy came upon the scene, like he was waiting for his other beat cop friend. Once they met up together, then they went ahead and called it in, since it seemed suspicious, seemed odd. But and after that, then, you know, Sherlock Holmes was able to see the scene. We just went to John Rance to check out what he had to say on the matter. And when we left last time, they were off to lunch and the opera to, you know, sort of get their bearings from this point forward. So let's get into it. Chapter 5. Our advertisement brings a visitor. Our morning's exertions had been too much for my weak health, and I was tired out in the afternoon. After Holmes' departure for the concert, I lay down upon the sofa and endeavored to get a couple of hours' sleep. It was a useless attempt. My mind had been too much excited by all that had occurred, and the strangest fancies and surmises crowded into it. Every time that I closed my eyes, I saw before me Every time that I closed my eyes, I saw before me the distorted, baboon-like countenance of the murdered man. So sinister was the impression which that face had produced upon me, that I found it difficult to feel anything but gratitude for him who had removed its owner from the world. If ever human features bespoke vice of the most malignant type, they were certainly those of Enoch J. Drebber of Cleveland. Still, I recognized that justice must be done, and that the depravity of the victim was no condonement in the eyes of the law. The more I thought of it, the more extraordinary did my companion's hypothesis, that the man had been poisoned, appear. I remembered how he had sniffed his lips, and had no doubt that he had detected something which had given rise to the idea. Then again, if not poison, what had caused the man's death, since there was neither wound nor marks of strangulation? But, on the other hand, whose blood was that which lay so thickly upon the floor? There were no signs of a struggle, nor had the victim any weapon with which he might have wounded an antagonist. As long as all these questions were unsolved, I felt that sleep would be no easy matter, either for Holmes or myself. His quiet, self-confident manner convinced me that he had already formed a theory which explained all the facts, though what it was I could not for an instant conjecture. He was very late in returning, so late that I knew that the concert could not have detained him all the time. Dinner was on the table before he appeared. "It was magnificent," he said as he took his seat. "Do you remember what Darwin says about music? He claims that the power of producing and appreciating it existed amongst the human race long before the power of speech was arrived at. Perhaps that is why we are so subtly influenced by it. There are vague memories in our souls of those misty centuries when the world was in its childhood." "That's a rather broad idea," I remarked. "One's ideas must be as broad as nature if they are to interpret nature," he answered. "What's the matter? You're not looking quite yourself. This Brixton Road affair has upset you." "To tell the truth, it has," I said. I ought to be more case-hardened after my Afghan experiences. I saw my own comrades hacked to pieces in my one without losing my nerve. I can understand. There is a mystery about this which stimulates the imagination. Where there is no imagination, there is no horror. Have you seen the evening paper? No. It gives a fairly good account of the affair. It does not mention the fact that when the man was raised up, a woman's wedding ring fell upon the floor. Just as well, it does not. Why? Look at this advertisement, he answered. I had one sent to every paper this morning immediately after the affair. He threw the paper across to me, and I glanced at the place indicated. It was the first announcement in the Found column. In Brixton Road, this morning, it ran, a plain gold wedding ring found in the roadway between the White Hart Tavern and Holland Grove. Apply Dr. Watson, 221B Baker Street, between 8 and 9 this evening. Excuse me my using your name, he said. If I used my own, some of these dunderheads would recognize it, and I want to meddle in the affair. That is all right, I answered. But supposing anyone applies, I have no ring. Oh, yes, you have, said he, handing me one. This will do very well. It is almost a facsimile. And who do you expect will answer this advertisement? Why, the man in the brown coat, our florid friend with the square toes. If he does not come himself, he will send an accomplice. Would you not consider it as too dangerous? Not at all. If my view of the case is correct, and I have every reason to believe that it is, this man would rather risk anything than lose the ring. According to my notion, he dropped it while stooping over Trevor's body and did not miss it at the time. After leaving the house, he discovered his loss and hurried back, but found the police already in possession, owing to his own folly in leaving the candle burning. He had to pretend to be drunk in order to allay the suspicions which might have been aroused by his appearance at the gate. Now, put yourself in that man's place. On thinking the matter over, it must have occurred to him that it was possible that he had lost the ring in the road after leaving the house. What would he do then? He would eagerly look out for the evening papers in the hope of seeing it among the articles found. His eye, of course, would light upon this. He would be overjoyed. Why should he fear a trap? There would be no reason in his eyes why the finding of the ring should be concerned with a murder. He would come. He will come. You shall see him within an hour. And then? I asked. Oh, you can leave me to deal with him then. Have you any arms? I have my old service revolver and a few cartridges. You had better clean it and load it. He will be a desperate man, and though I shall take him unawares, it is as well to be ready for anything. I went to my bedroom and followed his advice. When I returned with the pistol, the table had been cleared, and Holmes was engaged in his favorite occupation of scraping upon his violin. The plot thickens, he said as I entered. I have just had an answer to my American telegram. My view of the case is the correct one. And that is? I asked eagerly. My fiddle would be the better for new strings, he remarked. Put your pistol in your pocket. When the fellow comes, speak to him in an ordinary way. Leave the rest to me. Don't frighten him by looking at him too hard. It is 8 o'clock now, I said, glancing at my watch. Yes, he will probably be here in a few minutes. Open the door slightly. That will do. Now put the key on the inside. Thank you. This is a queer old book I picked up at the stall yesterday, De Jure Intelligentes, published in Latin at Liege in the Lowlands in 1642. Charles's head was still firm on his shoulders when this little brown-backed volume was struck off. Who is the printer? Philippe de Croix, whoever he may have been. On the flyleaf in very faded ink is written Ex Libris Juliami White. I wonder who William White was. Some pragmatical 17th century lawyer, I suppose. His writing had a legal twist about it. Here comes our man, I think. As he spoke, there was a sharp ring at the bell. Sherlock Holmes rose softly and moved his chair in the direction of the door. We heard the servant pass along the hall, and the sharp click of the latch as she opened it. Excuse me. Does Dr. Watson live here? Asked a clear but rather harsh voice. We could not hear the servant's reply, but the door closed and someone began to ascend the stairs. The footfall was an uncertain and shuffling one. A look of surprise passed over the face of my companion as he listened to it. It came slowly along the passage, and there was a feeble tap at the door. "Come in," I cried. At my summons, instead of the man of violence whom we expected, a very old and wrinkled woman hobbled into the apartment. She appeared to be dazzled by the sudden blaze of light, and after dropping a curtsy, she stood blinking at us with her bleared eyes and fumbling in her pocket with nervous, shaky fingers. I glanced at my companion, and his face had assumed such a disconsolate expression that it was all I could do to keep my countenance. The old crone drew out an evening paper and pointed at our advertisement. "It's this as has brought me, good gentleman," she said, dropping another curtsy. "A gold wedding ring at the Brixton Road. It belongs to my girl Sally, as was married only this time 12 months, which her husband is steward aboard a Union boat. And what he'd say if he comes home and found her without her ring is more than I can think, he being short enough at the best of times, but more especially when he has the drink. If it please you, she went to the circus last night along with—" "Is that her ring?" I asked. "The Lord be thanked," cried the old woman. "Sally will be a glad woman this night. That's the ring." "And what may your address be?" I inquired, taking up a pencil. 13 Duncan Street, Houndsditch, a weary way from here. The Brixton Road does not lie between any circus and Houndsditch," said Sherlock Holmes sharply. The old woman faced round and looked keenly at him from her little red-rimmed eyes. "The gentleman asked me for my address," she said. "Sally lives in lodgings at 3 Mayfield Place, Peckham." "And your name is?" "My name is Sawyer. Hers is Dennis." "Oh, I'm sorry." My apologies. "My name is Sawyer. Hers is Dennis, which Tom Dennis married her. And a smart, clean lad, too, as long as he's at sea and no steward in the company more thought of. But when on shore, what with the women and what with the liquor shops—" "Here's your ring, Miss Sawyer," I interrupted, in obedience to a sign from my companion. "It clearly belongs to your daughter, and I am glad to be able to restore it to the rightful owner." With many mumbled blessings and protestations of gratitude, the old crone packed it away in her pocket and shuffled off down the stairs. Sherlock Holmes sprang to his feet the moment that she was gone and rushed into his room. He returned in a few seconds, enveloped in an ulster and a cravat. "I'll follow her," he said hurriedly. "She must be an accomplice, and will lead me right to him. Wait up for me." The hall door had hardly slammed behind our visitor before Holmes had descended the stairs. Looking through the window, I could see her walking feebly along the other side, while her pursuer dogged her some distance little behind. "Either his whole theory is incorrect," I thought to myself, "or else he will be led now to the heart of the mystery." There was no need for him to ask me to wait up for him, for I felt that sleep was impossible until I heard the result of his adventure. It was close upon 9 when he set out. I had no idea how long he might be, but I sat stolidly, puffing at my pipe and skipping over the pages of Henry Murger's Vie de Bohème. 10 o'clock passed, and I heard the footsteps of the maid as she pattered off to bed. 11, and the more steady tread of the landlady passed my door, bound for the same destination. It was close upon 12 before I heard the sharp sound of his latchkey. The instant he entered, I saw by his face that he had not been successful. Amusement and chagrin seemed to be struggling for the mastery, until the former suddenly carried the day, and he burst into a hearty laugh. "I wouldn't have the Scotland Yarders know it for the world," he cried, dropping into his chair. "I have chaffed them so much that they would never let me hear the end of it. I can afford to laugh, because I know that I will be even with them in the long run. What is it then? I asked. Oh, I don't mind telling a story against myself. That creature had gone a little way when she began to limp and show every sign of being footsore. Presently, she came to a halt and hailed a four-wheeler which was passing. I managed to be close to her so as to hear the address, but I need not have been so anxious, for she sang it out loud enough to be heard at the other side of the street. "Drive to 13 Duncan Street, Houndsditch," she cried. This begins to look genuine, I thought, and having seen her safely inside, I perched myself behind. That's an art which every detective should be an expert at. Well, away we rattled, and never drew rein until we reached the street in question. I hopped off before we came to the door and strolled down the street in an easy, lounging way. I saw the cab pull up, the driver jumped down, and I saw him open the door and stand expectantly. Nothing came out, though. When I reached him, he was groping about frantically in the empty cab and giving vent to the finest assortment and collection of oaths that I ever listened to. There was no sign or trace of his passenger, and I fear it will be some time before he gets his fare. On inquiring at number 13, we found that the house belonged to a respectable paper-hanger named Keswick, and that no one of the name, either of Sawyer or Dennis, had ever been heard of there. "You don't mean to say," I cried in amazement, "that tottering, feeble old woman was able to get out of the cab while it was in motion, without either you or the driver seeing her?" "Old woman be damned," said Sherlock Holmes sharply. "We were the one... Oh, excuse me. We were the old woman to be so taken in. It must have been a young man, and an active one, too, beside being an incomparable actor. The get-up was inimitable. He saw that he was followed, no doubt, and used this means of giving me the slip. It shows that the man we are after is not as lonely as I imagined he was, but has friends who are ready to risk something for him. Now, Doctor, you're looking done up. Take my advice and turn in." I was certainly feeling very weary, so I obeyed his injunction. I left Holmes seated in front of the smoldering fire, and long into the watches of the night I heard the low, melancholy wailings of his violin, and knew that he was still pondering over the strange problem which he had set himself to unravel. Nice. Chapter 6. Tobias Gregson shows what he can do. I'm gonna take a sip of water before I start. Chapter 6. Tobias Gregson shows what he can do. The papers next day were full of the Brixton mystery, as they termed it. Each had a long account of the affair, and some had leaders upon it in addition. There was some information in them which was new to me. I still retain in my scrapbook numerous clippings and extracts bearing upon the case. Here is a condensation of the few of them. The Daily Telegraph remarked that in the history of crime there had seldom been a tragedy which presented stranger features. The German name of the victim, the absence of all other motive, and the sinister inscription on the wall all pointed to its perpetration by political refugees and revolutionists. The socialists had many branches in America, and the deceased had no doubt infringed their unwritten laws and had been tracked down by them. After alluding airily to the Vemgericht, I don't know how to, the Vemgericht. I wanna know what that is. One sec. It is VEH MGERICHT. What is this? How do you pronounce it though? The Vemgericht, also known as the Vemikort, Vim, or Holy Vem, was a system of secret vigilante-style criminal tribunals in medieval Westphalia, Germany. Active from the 12th to the 16th century, they were formed to enforce law and order during a period of imperial weakness and feudal instability. Okay. So this was like a mob vigilante trial system happening in medieval Germany. Okay. After alluding airily to the Webergericht, Aquatofana, Carbonari, the Mercianus of Brinvilliers, the Darwinian theory, the principle of Malthus, and the Ratcliffe Highway murders, the article concluded by admonishing the government and advocating a closer watch over foreigners in England. The Standard commented upon the fact that lawless outrages of the sort usually occurred under a liberal administration. They arose from the unsettling of the minds of the masses and the consequent weakening of all authority. The deceased was an American gentleman who had been residing for some weeks in the metropolis. He had stayed at the boarding house of Madame Charpentier in Torquay Terrace, Camberwell. He was accompanied in his travel by his private secretary, Mr. Joseph Stangerson. The two bade adieu to their landlady upon Tuesday, the 4th INST. I don't know why that. The 4th? What does that mean? The 4th. What is INST? What is this inst meaning? Institute. Instant. Okay. Gotcha. 4th INST means Tuesday the 4th of the month. Got it. So the two bade adieu to their landlady upon Tuesday the 4th, and departed to Euston Station with the avowed intention of catching the Liverpool Express. They were afterwards seen together upon the platform. Nothing more is known of them until Mr. Drebber's body was, as recorded, discovered in an empty house in the Brixton Road, many miles from Euston. How he came there, or how he met his fate, are questions which are still involved in mystery. Nothing is known of the whereabouts of Stangerson. We are glad to learn that Mr. Lestrade and Mr. Gregson of Scotland Yard are both engaged upon the case, and it is confidently anticipated that these well-known officers will speedily throw light upon the matter. The Daily News observed that there was no doubt as to the crime being a political one. The despotism and hatred of liberalism which animated the continental governments had had the effect of driving to our shores a number of men who might have made excellent citizens were they not soured by the recollection of all that they had undergone. Among these men there was a stringent code of honor, any infringement of which was punished by death. Every effort should be made to find the secretary Stangerson, and to ascertain some particulars of the habits of the deceased. A great step had been gained by the discovery of the address of the house at which he had boarded, a result which was entirely due to the acuteness and energy of Mr. Gregson of Scotland Yard. Sherlock Holmes and I read these notices over together at breakfast, and they appeared to afford him considerable amusement. I told you that, whatever happened, Lestrade and Gregson would be sure to score. That depends on how it turns out. Oh, bless you. It doesn't matter in the least. If the man is caught, it will be on account of their exertions. If he escapes, it will be in spite of their exertions. It's heads I win and tails you lose. Whatever they do, they will have followers. Un ça trouve toujours un plus... He speaks in French. I don't know how to say French. Let's see if I can just put it in. I want to hear how it sounds on. I would want to do this in Firefox. 1 second. Translate. We want. Can I just do dictate? No, I don't need to. I don't want to Sat. True. Toujours. Un plus. Sat. Qui. How do you pronounce this?
Un sot trouve toujours un plus sot qu'il admire.
I would never have gotten that.
Un sot trouve toujours un plus sot qu'il admire.
A fool always finds a bigger fool to admire him.
Wow, that's a good quote. Okay, so whatever they do, they will have followers.
Un sot trouve toujours un plus sot qu'il admire.
What on earth is that? I cried. For at this moment there came the pattering of many steps in the hall and on the stairs, accompanied by audible expressions of disgust upon the part of our landlady. It's the Baker Street Division of the Detective Police Force, said my companion gravely. And as he spoke, there rushed into the room half a dozen of the dirtiest and most ragged street Arabs that I clapped eyes on. "Attention!" cried Holmes in a sharp tone, and the 6 dirty little scoundrels stood in a line like so many disreputable statuettes. "In future, you shall send up Wiggins alone to report, and the rest of you must wait in the street. Have you found it, Wiggins?" "No, sir, we hadn't," said one of the youths. "I hardly expected you would. You must keep on until you do. Here are your wages." He handed each of them a shilling. "Now, off you go, and come back with a better report the next time." He waved his hand, and they scampered away downstairs like so many rats, and we heard their shrill voices next moment in the street. "There's more work to be got out of one of those little beggars than out of a dozen of the force," Holmes remarked. "The mere sight of an official-looking person seals men's lips. These youngsters, however, go everywhere and hear everything. They are as sharp as needles, too. All they want is organization." "Is it on this Brixton case that you are employing them?" I asked. "Yes, there is a point which I wish to ascertain. There is a point which I wish to ascertain. It is merely a matter of time. Hello, we are going to hear some news now with a vengeance. Here is Gregson coming down the road with beatitude written upon every feature of his face. Bound for us, I know. Yes, he is stopping. There he is." There was a violent peal at the bell, and in a few seconds the fair-haired detective came up the stairs, 3 steps at a time, and burst into our sitting room. "My dear fellow," he cried, wringing Holmes's unresponsive hand, "congratulate me! I have made the whole thing clear as day." A shade of anxiety seemed to me to cross my companion's expressive face. "Do you mean that you are on the right track?" he asked. "The right track? Why, sir, we have the man under lock and key." "And his name is?" "Arthur Charpentier, sub-lieutenant in Her Majesty's Navy," cried Gregson, pompously rubbing his fat hands and inflating his chest. Sherlock Holmes gave a sigh of relief and relaxed into a smile. "Take a seat and try one of these cigars," he said. "We are anxious to know how you managed it. Will you have some whiskey and water?" "I don't mind if I do," the detective answered. "The tremendous exertions which I have gone through during the last day or two have worn me out. Not so much bodily exertion, you understand, as the strain upon the mind. You will appreciate that, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, for we are both brain workers." "You do me too much honor," said Holmes gravely. "Let us hear how you arrived at this most gratifying result." The detective seated himself in the armchair and puffed complacently at his cigar. Then suddenly he slapped his thigh in a paroxysm of amusement. The fun of it is," he cried, "that that fool Lestrade, who thinks himself so smart, has gone off upon the wrong track altogether. He is after the secretary Stangerson, who had no more to do with the crime than the babe unborn. I have no doubt that he had caught him by this time." The idea tickled Gregson so much that he laughed until he choked. "And how did you get your clue?" "Ah, I'll tell you about it. Of course, Dr. Watson, this is strictly between ourselves. The first difficulty which we had to contend with was the finding of this American's antecedents. Some people would have waited until their advertisements were answered, or until parties came forward and volunteered information. That is not Tobias Gregson's way of going to work. You remember the hat beside the dead man? Yes, said Holmes. By John Underwood and Sons, 129 Camberwell Road. Gregson looked quite crestfallen. I had no idea that you noticed that, he said. Have you been there? No. Ha! Cried Gregson in a relieved voice. You should never neglect a chance, however small it may seem. To a great mind, nothing is little, remarked Holmes sententiously. Well, I went to Underwood and asked him if he had sold a hat of that size and description. He looked over his books and came on it at once. He had sent the hat to a Mr. Drebber, residing at Charpentier's boarding establishment, Torquay Terrace. Thus I got at his address. Smart, very smart, murmured Sherlock Holmes. I next called upon Madame Charpentier, continued the detective. I found her very pale and distressed. Her daughter was in the room, too, an uncommonly fine girl she is, too. She was looking red about the eyes, and her lips trembled as I spoke to her. That didn't escape my notice. I began to smell a rat. You know the feeling, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, when you come upon the right scent, a kind of thrill in your nerves. Have you heard of the mysterious death of your late boarder, Mr. Enoch J. Drebber of Cleveland? I asked. The mother nodded. She didn't seem able to get out a word. The daughter burst into tears. I felt more than ever that these people knew something of the matter. At what o'clock did Mr. Drebber leave your house for the train? I asked. At 8 o'clock, she said, gulping in her throat to keep down her agitation. His secretary, Mr. Strangerson, said that there were 2 trains, one at 9:15 and one at 11. He was to catch the first. And what was the last which you saw of him? A terrible change came over the woman's face as I asked the question. Her features turned perfectly livid. It was some seconds before she could get out the single word, yes, and when it did come, it was in a husky, unnatural tone. There was a silence for a moment, and then the daughter spoke in a calm, clear voice. No good can ever come of falsehood, mother, she said. Let us be frank with this gentleman. We did see Mr. Drebber again. God forgive you, cried Madame Charpentier, throwing up her hands and sinking back in her chair. You have murdered your brother. Arthur would rather that we spoke the truth, the girl answered firmly. You had best tell me all about it now, I said. Half confidences are worse than none. Besides, you do not know how much we know of it. On your head be it, Alice, cried her mother, and then turning to me, I will tell you all, sir. Do not imagine that my agitation on behalf of my son arises from my fear lest he should have had a hand in this terrible affair. He is certainly innocent of it. My dread, however, that in your eyes and the eyes of others he may appear to be compromised. That, however, is surely impossible. His high character, his profession, his antecedents would all forbid it. Your best way is to make a clean breast of the facts, I answered. Depend upon it, if your son is innocent, he will be none the worse. Perhaps, Alice, you had better leave us together, she said, and her daughter withdrew. Now, sir, she continued, I had no intention of telling you all this, but since my poor daughter has disclosed it, I have no alternative. Having once decided to speak, I will tell you all about without omitting any particular. It is your wisest course, said I. Mr. Drebber had been with us for nearly 3 weeks. He and his secretary, Mr. Stangerson, had been traveling on the continent. I noticed a Copenhagen label upon each of their trunks, showing that it had been their last stopping place. Stangerson was a quiet, reserved man, but his employer, I am so sorry to say, was far otherwise. He was coarse in his habits and brutish in his ways. The very night of his arrival he became very much the worse for drink, and indeed, after 12 o'clock in the day, he could hardly ever be said to be sober. His manners towards the maid-servants were disgustingly free and familiar. Worst of all, he speedily assumed the same attitude toward my daughter, Alice, and spoke to her more than once in a way which, fortunately, she is too innocent to understand. On one occasion, he actually seized her in his arms and embraced her, in an outrage which caused his own secretary to reproach him for his unmanly conduct. But why did you stand all this? I asked. I suppose that you can get rid of your boarders when you wish. Madame Charpentier blushed at my pertinent question. Would to God that I had given notice on the very day that he came, she said, but it was a sore temptation. They were paying £1 a day each, 14 pounds a week, and this is a slack season. I am a widow, and my boy in the Navy has cost me much. I grudged to lose the money. I acted for the best. This last was too much, however, and I gave him notice to leave on account of it. That was the reason of his going. Well? My heart grew light when I saw him drive away. My son is on leave just now, but I did not tell him anything of all this, for his temper is violent, and he is passionately fond of his sister. When I closed the door behind them, a load seemed to be lifted from my mind. Alas, in less than an hour there was a ring at the bell, and I learned that Mr. Drebber had returned. He was much excited, and evidently the worse for drink. He forced his way into the room where I was sitting with my daughter, and made some incoherent remark about having missed his train. He then turned to Alice, before my very face, proposed to her that she should fly with him. You are of age, he said, and there is no law to stop you. I have money enough and to spare. Never mind the old girl here, but come along with me now straight away. You shall live like a princess. Poor Alice was so frightened that she shrunk away from him, but he caught her by the wrist and endeavored to draw her towards the door. I screamed, and at that moment my son Arthur came into the room. What happened then, I do not know. I heard oaths and the confused sounds of a scuffle. I was too terrified to raise my head. When I did look up, I saw Arthur standing in the doorway, laughing, with a stick in his hand. I don't think that fine fellow will trouble us again, he said. I will go after him and see what he does with himself. With those words, he took his hat and started off down the street. The next morning, we heard of Mr. Drebber's mysterious death. This statement comes from Mrs. Charpentier's lips, with many gasps and pauses. At times, she spoke so low that I could hardly catch the words. I made shorthand notes of all that she said, however, so that there should be no possibility of a mistake. It's quite exciting, said Sherlock Holmes with a yawn. What happened next? When Miss Charpentier paused, the detective continued, I saw that the whole case hung upon one point. Fixing her with my eye in a way which I always found effective with women, I asked her at what hour her son returned. I do not know, she answered. Not know? No, he has a latchkey, and he let himself in. After you went to bed? Yes. When did you go to bed? About 11. So your son was gone at least 2 hours? Yes. Possibly 4 or 5? Yes. What was he doing during that time? I do not know, she answered, turning white to her very lips. Of course, after that, there was nothing more to be done. I found out where Lieutenant Charpentier was, took 2 officers with me, and arrested him. When I touched him on the shoulder and warned him to come quietly with us, he answered us as bold as brass. I suppose you are arresting me for being concerned in the death of that scoundrel Drebber, he said. We had said nothing to him about it, so that his alluding to it had a most suspicious aspect. Very, said Holmes. He still carried the heavy stick which the mother described him as having with him when he followed Drebber. It was a stout oak cudgel. What is your theory, then? Well, my theory is that he followed Drebber as far as the Brixton Road. When there, a fresh altercation arose between them, in the course of which Drebber received a blow from the stick, in the pit of the stomach perhaps, which killed him without leaving any mark. The night was so wet that no one was about, so Charpentier dragged the body of his victim into the empty house. As to the candle, and the blood, and the writing on the wall, and the ring, they may all be so many tricks to throw the police on the wrong scent. Well done, said Holmes in an encouraging voice. Really, Gregson, you are getting along. We shall make something of you yet. I flatter myself that I managed it rather neatly, the detective answered, proudly. The young man volunteered a statement in which he said that after following Drebber some time, the latter perceived him and took a cab in order to get away from him. On his way home, he met an old shipmate and took a long walk with him. On being asked where his old shipmate lived, he was unable to give any satisfactory reply. I think the whole case fits together uncommonly well. What amuses me is to think of Lestrade, who had started off upon the wrong scent. I'm afraid he won't make much of it. Why, by Jove, here's the very man himself. It was indeed Lestrade, who had ascended the stairs while we were talking, and who now entered the room. The assurance and jauntiness which generally marked his demeanor and dress were, however, wanting. His face was disturbed and troubled, while his clothes were disarranged and untidy. He had evidently come with the intention of consulting with Sherlock Holmes, for on perceiving his colleague, he appeared to be embarrassed and put out. He stood in the center of the room, fumbling nervously with his hat, and uncertain what to do. This is a most extraordinary case," he said at last. "A most incomprehensible affair." "Ah, so you find it so, Mr. Lestrade," cried Gregson triumphantly. "I thought you had come to that conclusion. Have you managed to find the secretary, Mr. Joseph Stangerson?" "The secretary, Mr. Joseph Stangerson," said Lestrade gravely, "was murdered at Holliday's private hotel about 6 o'clock this morning." And that's the end of the chapter. Ooh, spooky. All right. This is quite the expository set of chapters, is it not? So, let's start from chapter 5. Watson was very tired after this morning. Sherlock Holmes went to the opera, but Watson went home. And Watson was feeling it. He has not seen a death like this. The victim just seemed very ugly, gross, but he still had, of course, a twinge of compassion for the fact that he was now dead. That justice must be done, and that Watson doesn't really understand how Sherlock Holmes has arrived at poison as being the murder method. And Sherlock Holmes did sniff the lips of the cadaver, of the corpse, and presumably concluded that there was some sort of poison to be smelled. He is an expert on it after all. But of course, there was also the blood on the floor and the wall that had no reason. There was no struggle, and there was no weapon. It just seemed like there were too many questions to be answered for him to have any sort of peace. For Watson to have any sort of peace, it seems there was too many questions that needed to be answered. Sherlock Holmes arrived back at their home pretty late in the evening. Dinner was already out. He was already it was late in the day. Naturally Sherlock Holmes is very like, I love music. Let me tell about the effect of music on man. He's very he's so extra in how he explains and describes everything, while at the same time being very concise when it appeals to him. But when he has a captive audience, he is someone who goes out of his way to make very flowery descriptions. Watson's like, I should be able to stomach this kind of thing, but I've been having a hard time here. Sherlock Holmes then puts a paper on the desk and he says, hey, so the stories have been, the story of the murder has been running in the papers, and it's a pretty good description of what's going on. But I also put out an advertisement, and the advertisement is for a gold wedding ring that was dropped around the scene of the crime, outside around the scene of the crime. And I used your name. Sorry, I used your name because if I used my name, people might be a little suspicious that I was putting out an advertisement. But I used your name, Dr. John Watson. So within the next hour or so, someone's probably going to come by here to ask about it. Because remember, Sherlock Holmes was using the ring as bait. This was an important point. Oh my gosh. Actually, I'm so sorry, but I think for right now, I do want to make sure that I want to make sure I record this so that I can easily get it later. Recording. Let me also just make sure if I have space for it. I think I do. Okay. This shouldn't be so bad. I'm gonna start recording now. Okay. So all of this activity was very much too much for Watson. Watson, his health is on it. He is having some health issues, so this was too much activity for him to really handle. So he goes back home while Sherlock Holmes goes to the opera. Watson is torn up about this because there are too many mysteries for him to really feel comfortable in disengaging from it. Why was there so much blood if apparently he died from poison? There was no weapon, no sort of reason, no scuffle, no struggle, no reason for so much blood to be on the floor and the wall. And I saw that Sherlock Holmes, he saw that Sherlock Holmes sniffed the lips of the corpse, so must have found some sort of smell of poison. He is an expert. So there's still a lot going on here that Watson can't really stop thinking about it. So when Sherlock Holmes does arrive, it's late at this point, far later than the concert would have taken. So he gets back probably around seven or so. And when he gets back, he puts on the table a newspaper that ran about the details of the case. So the case's details were now being reported on in the newspapers. And in addition to that, so Sherlock Holmes says, wow, this was a pretty good summation of the details of the case, but I want you to look what I put right here. I actually took out an advertisement in the newspaper, and the advertisement is for the golden ring that we did find. And remember, because we did find a golden ring, we're going to use this as bait. I did use your name because if I put my name in the newspaper, people would be like, they would be suspicious. They would think that I'm up to something because I'm not exactly unknown in this area. But I said to come I said for whoever responds to the advertisement to come to 221B Baker Street, ask for John Watson, and come around 8 or 9. So within the next hour or so, we should be expecting someone to come here and ask about the ring directly. But it could also be an accomplice of someone who is working with the murderer. So, don't get too excited. We don't fully know what we're expecting here. But this is a pretty good way of making sure that we do have the next leg of our investigation established here. And Holmes asks Watson to prepare his revolver just in case he gets violent, to prepare his service weapon for, the potential scuffle. Let's see. The rest of it is just kind of like banter between the two. Okay. Now, someone arrives at the door. Sherlock Holmes, checks the window and makes sure, okay, so this is the person that is coming in. They come up the stairs. They're let in by the servant. They come upstairs, and it ends up being an old woman. It ends up being an old lady. And this old lady has a story of the gold wedding ring, the gold woman's wedding ring that was in Brixton Road. Apparently, she has a daughter named Sally and was married around a year ago. Last year, her daughter Sally has a husband that is, you know, it looks like So it's the sob story essentially. It's like saying like that wedding ring belongs to my daughter Sally, and her husband's going to be super upset if he comes back and she doesn't have the wedding ring, because keep in mind this is 1878, so if women didn't have a ring on, this it was a mark of it was like a slap in the face to a husband. She gives the address that she lives at, and the address that this old woman gives is not actually close to the place where the ring was found. And this, of course, raises some eyebrows. And she says that that's not her address. That's actually Sally's address, her daughter's address. So it's, nothing wrong here. Sherlock Holmes signals over to Watson, like, go ahead, give it to her. And Watson goes ahead and puts the ring in an envelope and gives the ring to the woman. And then after the woman leaves, Sherlock Holmes immediately grabs his coat and his cravat and runs out the door so that he can tail the woman as she returns to wherever she's going. Now, it looks like the woman was limping after some time, and she hailed a cab. She hailed a horse-drawn cab, and Sherlock Holmes actually stowed himself underneath it without anyone noticing. So he rides along hidden in this carriage with the old woman in the cab, and by the time they get to their destination, the driver drops down to open the cab door, and there's no one there. How? This was an old woman. And Sherlock Holmes is like, this was not an old woman. This was a very good actor that pretended to be an old woman and successfully got us, like bamboozled us. So it's like part amusement and part frustration, because this is it's a funny development, considering that wasn't an old woman, so someone was very talented in actually disguising themselves, but also that was my lead. So I just double check here. Okay, yeah. So Sherlock Holmes runs out the door to follow this old lady and didn't come back home for another like 4 hours. So he was like out tailing this lady for a while. And he comes back and he's like, wow, I don't blame the Scotland Yard for not figuring this out, because this is a lot. Especially because I've made fun of them so much that I would never hear the end of it if I told them the details of what just happened. So yeah, this old woman, presumably, walked along, and eventually it seemed like she limped, and then hailed a cab, and he stowed away on the cab to wait for her to depart. When they got to where they were going, and she did say the woman did say what address she was going to: 13 Duncan Street, Houndsditch. And Sherlock Holmes was like, this actually is checking out. That is the address that she said. So it seems like this might actually be real. But by the time they got there, the driver jumped down, opened the cab door. There was no one there. So clearly they were duped by some really great actor. Let's see. And clearly this actor noticed that they were followed, gave that fake address to prolong the ruse, and then escaped out of the cab without being noticed because Sherlock Holmes couldn't see out of the cab while being stowed away on it. He's like perched on it in a way where he couldn't be seen. At this point, Watson is super duper tired, and Holmes is like, Watson, you need to go to sleep. You need to take a rest. I get it. I understand. But if you don't rest, you're not going to be able to be a part of this at all, even. So Watson goes to bed, and meanwhile, he can hear the long screeching wails of the melancholy violin into the night. The next day, so now we're in the next chapter. We're in chapter 6. The next day, this one's all about Tobias Gregson, the Scotland Yard official who Sherlock Holmes is very contemptuous of, because he gets all the credit for anything that Sherlock Gregson and Lestrade get the credit for anything that Sherlock Holmes does, because they're famous at this point. They're well known for their efforts on the force. The beginning part of the chapter is a summation of what the different papers are saying. Some of them are saying, hey, this is a socialist plot. Some of them are saying, this is, clearly like people are drawing connections and conclusions to things that are absolutely not related to this. So it's just like a feeding frenzy, like piranhas smelling blood in the water. After they go through all these different stories, Sherlock Holmes, after going through all these stories, Sherlock Holmes welcomes into their home like 6 or 7 street urchins that are his like personal army of informants that run around. He pays them a shilling each. They run around and just gather information and intel from different people so that he has this hush source of information, since a police officer makes people shut up, as they should. A police officer makes people shut up, but little tiny kids, people don't worry about them, so they'll just speak however they want to. So after all these people come out, and Sherlock Holmes is like, go on and find more details about. Let's see. Okay, so Sherlock Holmes asked all these street urchins that came in. He previously asked them to go find something for him. We're not told what it is. And at that point, Gregson rings the bell, and he comes up into the house. Gregson claims to have made a breakthrough in the case and has figured out something based on his detective work, based on his interviews that he has conducted. He has figured out some more information on the surrounding circumstances of the ring and the people involved and the secretary and the sub-lieutenant of Her Majesty's Navy. This is who they think, Gregson thinks that they have captured the person that they are looking for that has committed the murder. So using the hat that was found next to the body, Gregson was able to figure out where it was sold from. He went over to the store and inquired with the clerk, hey, have you sold a hat that looked like this guy's hat recently? The store clerk checks the ledger and says, yes, I have. And here is the person who did it. It was John under, let me see. So the hat was sold to Mr. Drebber, of course, who was residing at Charpentier's boarding establishment. So he was living in a boarding house. The victim was living in a boarding house while he was staying there. And then Gregson went over to Madame Charpentier and found her, the madam, and her daughter. And they seemed pretty out of sorts. They seemed pretty out of sorts. Gregson, based on these reactions, seems to believe that they know something that he wants to know. Gregson asks when Mr. Drebber left for Mr. Drebber left the boarding house. Mr. Drebber and Mr. Sanderson both left last night. Mr. Drebber left at 8 o'clock for a train, and then Mr. Stangerson sorry, I'm trying to get the details down. Okay, so he and his secretary, Mr. Drebber and Mr. Stangerson, left at 8 o'clock to catch the 9:15 train. Gregson asked if this was the last that they saw of him, and they got all clammed up. They were nervous, and the daughter says, yes, we did see Mr. Drebber again. Gregson's like, dude, tell me more. Tell me more about what you know. And this is there's so many details that it gets really dense to go through. This is mostly for me, so I'm going to just go ahead and I don't need to go through the chapter 5, but chapter 6 I do kind of need to start from the top again, like I did before. So chapter 6, the papers the next day were all going crazy about this murder. Now they had more details. All the different papers were saying different things. The first part of the chapter is them reading through the papers, reading through the stories to see what is being said. Sherlock Holmes is like, this is, generally okay. This is a generally good description of the events. But what I want you to look at is the fact that we did take out a... No, I'm sorry. So they look at all the newspapers. A bunch of little kids came up the stairs into their house, and this is Sherlock Holmes' network of informants. They are street urchins that go around and rustle up information in ways that police officers and detectives can't, because people get tight-lipped around people that are officials and on the case. He gives each of them a shilling, tells them to go find something that we are not told what we're not told what, but he tells them all to go continue looking for something that he's looking to find. And right afterwards, Gregson rings the doorbell and says, "Hey, I did find the guy that I think did it. His name is Arthur Charpentier. And he's a sub-lieutenant in Her Majesty's Navy." Sherlock Holmes says, "Come on in. Let's hear about it. What do you got?" And Gregson is just so happy to have figured something out without Sherlock Holmes's help that he's just over the moon. Sherlock Holmes says, here's some whiskey. Tell us about it. Tell us what you found out. And then Gregson launches into this huge story all about how, by using the hat that was next to the corpse's body, he was able to figure out where that hat was sold from. After figuring out where it was sold from, Gregson went over to that establishment, said, "Hey, have you sold a hat to anyone? Have you sold a hat like this to anyone in the recent past?" The clerk says, "Yes, we have. We sold it to a Mr. Drebber, and he is currently living at Charpentier's boarding house." Yeah. Gregson asks the clerk at the store whether or not a hat has been sold at this establishment that matches his description. And yes, it was sold to a Mr. Drebber, who is currently residing at the Charpentier's boarding establishment. And that's how the address was, that's how he got his address. Once he knew that, then Gregson went on over to Charpentier's boarding establishment and finds Madame Charpentier and her daughter both there, and they're both very nervous, shaking, red in the face, sort of crying. They clearly know something about what's going on, and they're busted up about it. So, firstly, Gregson asks if they have seen, when was the last time that they saw Mr. Drebber alive? And that was when they left around 8 o'clock last night, or 8 o'clock on the night of the murder. Gregson asked when they saw Mr. Drebber last, and it was 8 o'clock on the night of the murder because he was catching a train with his secretary at 9:15. Gregson then asks, "Did you see him again at any point?" And neither of them seem to want to talk, but the daughter pipes up and says, "They're going to find out eventually. We need to come clean about this. Yes, we did see Mr. Drebber again afterwards." They describe Mr. Drebber, so the victim, has been with them in the boarding establishment for around 3 weeks. He and his secretary had been traveling around, and it seemed that they were going to Copenhagen. That was the last place. The last place they'd been was Copenhagen. The secretary Stangerson was quiet and reserved, but the employer was brutish. He grabbed my daughter a few times, and he's just generally a shithead. see. Now, ordinarily, a person running a boarding establishment would say, "Get the hell out! What are you doing here? What are you're disrespecting, your hosts that are keeping you here." But they were in a pretty tight pinch money wise, so they really needed the extra shillings because it was 14 a week. That was a pretty penny for them. And she's a widow. They're having a hard time making ends meet. Ordinarily, also, I do have a son. So Madame Charpentier then says, "I do also have a son, and he is away on. He is on leave, but they don't want to tell him anything about this because he's willing to get violent." Okay, wait, so Madame Charpentier ordinarily would have kicked Mr. Drebber and his secretary out, but since they need the money because she's a widow and her son is in the Navy, they really needed the money. Her son is on leave now, but they don't want to tell anything. Her son is on leave now, but they don't want to tell him anything about what's been going on because he's willing to get violent and will probably go too far because he loves his sister. When it seemed that Mr. Drebber was going to leave for good and he was going to catch that train, they were ecstatic. They were so happy to see him gone. But then it turned out that he came back around midnight, and he seemed drunk and just awful. He was like, he was scaring them. He was scaring the Okay, so at around midnight, Mr. Trevor actually came back and he was drunk and he started scaring them. He started being like, "Alice, come along with me. Let's run away together." But at that moment, Arthur walked into the room and saw this all happening, and they don't know what happened afterwards because they just heard a bunch of cursing. They heard a scuffle, and when all was said and done, they go downstairs and they see Arthur with a stick in his hand saying, "I don't think that guy's going to mess around with us anymore." He then took his hat and ran down the street, and the next morning they heard about Mr. Drebber's death. It was very difficult for Miss Charpentier to get all this information out. Sherlock Holmes is unimpressed. It's like, oh, cool. That's great information. A lot of good backstory. It didn't really tell me much. So then Gregson asks Mrs. Charpentier, "When did your son come back after he ran down the street catching like going after this guy?" And she gets really tight-lipped and she says, I don't know. I after I went to bed." And Gregson seemed very unconvinced that was all the story. Once once Gregson realized that they were lying to protect him, they found out where he was and arrested him right away. When they arrested Arthur, the son, he said, he knew that they were coming after him about Drebber's death. So the fact that so when the mother didn't have anything else to say, they were like, okay, so we got to arrest Arthur Charpentier for the murder of Enoch Drebber. When they tap him on the shoulder saying like, hey, you got to come with us, he says, oh, I assume that you're hearing about the death of the guy, about the death of Drebber. And no one said anything about that. So it was suspicious that he arrived at that conclusion before anyone said anything. He was still carrying the stick that apparently he was carrying after the scuffle with Drebber last night, or after the scuffle with Drebber on the night of the murder. He still had the stick on him. Sherlock Holmes asks, what do you think happened then? And Gregson says that Arthur followed Drebber as far as the Brixton Road, where the ring was found, or where he said the ring was found, so around where the house was. And when Arthur caught up to Drebber, they had another fight. They got into another scuffle. Drebber probably got hit in the stomach with a stick that Arthur's still holding, since it's a stout oak cudgel. And it was raining, so no one was out and about. Gregson thinks that Arthur Charpentier killed Drebber with the stout stick that he is holding so that it wouldn't leave any marks. And apparently, because he lit a candle in the house where he brought the body, that's why John Rance, the night watch patrolman, realized that something was going on there. And Gregson believes that all the other details, so the blood, the writing on the wall, the ring, etc., they were all tricks to throw the police off the scent. Now, this does sound pretty convincing. Sherlock Holmes is, good job, Gregson. All right. That seems to be pretty good. So, while all this was going on, Gregson was laughing his ass off, saying, oh, Lestrade's on some wild goose chase looking for the secretary. And after getting done with this story, Lestrade actually knocks on the door and comes in and has some bad news, which is that the secretary ended up murdered, dead. How? How did that happen? So yeah, that's basically where we're about now. And then the chapter ended with Lestrade coming in and saying, yep, the secretary is dead. Man, it is getting harder to sum up the important details of these. Each chapter is more dense than the last of more things. So I'm gonna stop recording. I'm going to take one last break. And I know that went for longer than I expected. I didn't expect it to take that long. I also had to go over. I need to figure out my process for doing this. So maybe it means sketching out a sort of plan ahead of time, but I think that's it for right now. Variety Hour ended up being mostly going over this. I would like to keep going, but I think my brain's a little fried after 2 chapters of some good plot. So I think that'll be about it for today. I'm gonna turn in early, maybe try to get some work done on the next video so that comes out. I also, next time, I really want to play some Descenders. I've really been enjoying that game, Descenders. The next chapter, let me just and the next chapter, chapter 7, we'll be doing this on Monday, and it is Light in the Darkness. Chapter 7, Light in the Darkness. So until then, this has been the Streaming Study Hall for Curious Cats. You know where it's at. It is Balco Bops. I appreciate your time. Thank you for being here. Happy Juneteenth, everybody.